Growing up as a child, I loved this subject called mathematics. At the first sight, mathematics looks like a colossal web with several bows growing from one common center. But a constant question always seems to arise in my mind that how would we define mathematics actually? It is same as if I ask you what was math actually made up of. Seems tricky? Yes, this very question had also tricked many philosophers and mathematicians from centuries, and still an unanswered question.
Mathematicians only are dealing with the structure of the reasoning, and they do not really care about what they're talking. They don't even need to know what they're talking about, or as they themselves say, or whether what they say is true. Now, I explain that. If you state the axioms, you say such and such is so, and such and such is so, and such and such is so, what then? Then the logic can be carried out.
In the recorded history, the oldest evidences of counting can be found in Africa. A bone known as Yang bone is discovered in the Congo region, which is claimed by many historians and archaeologists as the oldest known evidences of counting. On that bone, they have found many unknown marks which are possibly used to count the cattle they used to have. There has always been a cultural and scientific impact of maths in every society they have existed. Whether it's Indus or Roman civilization, it doesn't matter. Math seems to be possible only due to the concept of numbers. It looks like they are the key elements to understand the whole structure of the mathematics. One may claim that the numbers are nothing but just the symbols that we use to drive some mathematical rules which are further applied on problems to solve them in different fields like physics, engineering, or even architecture, etc. In number systems, numbers are mainly of four types. First comes the natural numbers, second comes the integers, third comes the rational numbers, and fourth comes the real numbers. We can define them all. Let them define one by one to understand them thoroughly. To understand this whole sort of the structure of the mathematics, we have to first take a look at natural numbers. Natural numbers are nothing but the usual numbers that we use in counting. For example 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. Now we can build the set of the integers without referencing integers by the help of natural numbers. Let's see how. We can define integers as being the result of subtracting natural numbers from each other in every possible way. Let's take an example to understand it thoroughly. Let's say we take 0 and 3, both are natural numbers. Yep, and there is only two possible ways to subtract these numbers from each other. First can be 0 minus 3, which will give result as minus 3. Second can be 3 minus 0, which will give result in 3. Now both minus 3 and 3 will be counted as the elements or members of the integers. This association of an integer to its parent natural number is known as its equivalent class. For example, 3 has an equivalent class consist of 3, 0, 4, 1, 100, 3, 100, and so on. Under the same definition of integers also inherent their structure and their properties from natural numbers. Let's see how. To understand this, let's take an example. Let's say we have an integer associated with x, y. Then it will be less than equal to an integer associated with z, w if and only if x plus z is less than equal to y plus w. Rational numbers can be constructed out of integers by a similar kind of approach. One can define rationals as all the possible ways in which we can divide each and every integer with each other. For example, 7 by 152, minus 1 by 3, 2 by 3, etc. We can also define the properties of the rational numbers in terms of the properties of integers in the same way we have done it for integers with the help of natural numbers. We can also create real numbers from rational numbers using the concept called Dedekind's cut. It's nothing but just a simple cut which splits the rational numbers into two sets, one as lower set and other as upper set. To understand this, let's take an example. Let's say we have made a Dedekind's cut at 3, then we can define lower set as all the rational numbers which are less than 3. and to be specific, upper set can be defined as all the rational numbers which are equal to either 3 or greater than 3. If you observe carefully, in the above case, the cut defines the real number 3. Let's take in more general case. Let's say we made a Dedekind's cut between somewhere 1 and 2 such that the lower set will be defined as all the rational numbers x such that x square is less than 2, and upper set is defined as all the rational numbers y such that y square is greater than or equal to 2. If you observe carefully, there is no smallest element in the upper set. It will be root 2, but that's not a rational number. But that is our actual point. This time the cut defines the number root 2. So we can claim that the real numbers can be defined as all the possible ways in which you cut or split the rational numbers. The cut is identified with either the smallest element in the upper set, if one exists, or otherwise it's the gap between the two sets, like in this case is root 2. So it seems that the structure and the properties of each type of number can be defined in terms of the previous type. But in all the discussion, one question still remained untouched. It is that, is there any way to define natural numbers also without referencing them? Natural numbers can also be constructed from more basic ingredients. Yes, it is true. This massive task of defining the natural numbers was done by a great mathematician known as Peano in his famous work known as Peano's Axioms. He defines the natural number with the concepts like basics of set and its definition, concepts of equality, and the concept of function. Now let us try to understand Peano's axiom in such a way that we can understand how it defines natural numbers. First thing first is that Peano's axiom has a aim to make a set which behaves exactly like the set of natural numbers, but without referencing them. Now you have understand the aim. Now we can resume further. So we have axiom 1 which states that Zelda is in N. This is nothing but just a declaration that N is not an empty set. Zelda is there. Coming to the axiom 2, it states that there is a function S whose inputs and outputs are in N. In other words, it trying to say that if x belongs to N, then S of x also belongs to N. This axiom basically defines what is the next element should be in set N. In the whole story of understanding the natural numbers from their basic ingredients, the concept or the intuition that what should be the next element in the whole set N is the most important thing that we are going through these axioms, discussing time to time. So mind you, this is a very important concept. So take a look at it again if you don't understand this. Now coming back, suppose if S of Zelda becomes equal to the Zelda, which is very possible because it did not violate any axioms till now that we have discussed so far, then nothing besides the Zelda is required to be in N. And this is a very massive problem. And to solve this problem, we have to introduce our next axiom, which is axiom 3. So axiom 3 states simply that Zelda can never be the output of S. It looks simple, such that the statement of S of x equal to Zelda becomes falsary for every x belonging to N. But now what about S of Zelda? If S of Zelda becomes equal to S of Zelda, which is allowed by the axioms that we have discussed so far, in that case nothing besides Zelda and S of Zelda is required to be in N, which is the same case we have discussed above. But now this is looking like a different problem. To solve this problem, we have to introduce our next axiom, which is axiom 4. So axiom 4 basically states that if x and y are the elements of N and S of x equal to S of y, then x should be equal to y. So what it tries to say? It tries to say that different inputs to S will give us different outputs. Now finally we are guaranteed an infinite chain or set, because we have guaranteed that the output and inputs have a correlation such that the inputs that we give to S will always give us different outputs. Now we are ready with the set that we can call as set of natural numbers. If you try to observe, they are nothing but the natural numbers you know as, but just written differently. Like you can say Zelda as 0, S of Zelda as 1, S of Zelda as 2. But what about S actually? Here you notice that we never specified its mechanisms, but we just enforced some constraint on it to use it as an intuitive notion of next in the form of function. But still there is one thing left, which is about its size. Still anyone can introduce new elements which will end up as loops, and our set will become bigger than the known set of the natural numbers. To solve this final problem, our final axiom will come into the picture, which is axiom 5. Axiom 5 is also known as axiom of induction. To understand this, suppose there is a subset called T of n such that it contains Zelda, i.e. Zelda is an element of T, and it also contains S of X if it contains X, i.e. which means that X is an element of T. That implies S of X is an element of T. The only subset T of n that meets these criteria is n itself. This axiom simply states that n should be the minimal set that satisfies the previous axioms. Now we can define natural numbers as the constituent of minimal non-empty set that admits a successor function, i.e. any function S satisfying the Peano's axioms. So we are clear that the natural numbers can also be produced from more basic ideas using Peano's axiom. But is there any way to reduce Peano's axiom also to more basic ideas? And where this process of simplification just ends? It seems that there is no ending to the process of simplification in mathematics. And it is true. This is a very serious question that lies in the foundations of mathematics. That what are the foundations of mathematics and where this process of simplification just ends? And it seems many philosophers and mathematicians are also not cleared on this. In 1800s, two mathematicians named as Gottlob Frege and Bertrand Russell both have tried to work upon this problem and later on advocated for a philosophical position known as logicism. So basically logicism says that at the bottom of the pyramid of maths lies logic. This leads to some obvious questions like what exactly logic is. Logic has fundamentally a philosophical meaning rather than a mathematical one. Ernest Tapper has beautifully quoted that a logical preposition is a preposition which has a complete generality and it's true in virtue of its form rather than its context. Gottlob Frege used the same logic to prove famously the 1 plus 1 is equal to 2 in few hundred pages and many more other things as well. This is essentially the same status as the mathematics' most well-known axiomatic system known as Zermelo-Fraenkel set theory. Even without including the controversial axioms that lies in Zermelo-Fraenkel set theory, one can derive most of the classical mathematics by using the 8 or 9 axioms which lies in this set theory, which seems to be a logicist success. But wait for it. We know that we will never have an axiomatic system which produce all the maths thanks to the Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Unfortunately, some of the Zermelo-Fraenkel set theory axioms cannot be considered of pure logic, like the axiom of infinity. Logicism seems to have a great success, but there is so much to discover about to the foundations of mathematics that they are not enough to explain every bit of it. By the new theories coming out regularly, like category theory and homotomo type theory, seems to be a better candidate for the foundations of mathematics.